Hey everyone, it's Ed Gutowski. Wanted to welcome you to week 2 and kind of had a couple of things I wanted to talk about in the second video for our class. First thing is, I know that there have been some issues with Canvas. Canvas did some weird things in week 1. Basically, I'm teaching 6 classes and Canvas is sort of linking all the various classes together. So some of the videos may have been hard to watch or may have been the incorrect video. I'm working to fix that now, but if there were any problems with submitting assignments for week 1, just email me and I'll make sure that you get full credit for anything that might gotten sort of messed up with the Canvas errors. Second thing I wanted to talk about, I've read your discussion board questions. Loved what you guys had to say. I loved what you had to say about rhetoric and argument, which this video is going to focus on in just a couple of minutes about the next aspect of rhetoric and argument. But loved your comments, and if you go into the discussion board, you'll notice that I do respond to the discussion board questions. I read over everything and kind of just sort of chime in from time to time, but I'm always reading and looking at the discussion board questions. Great discussions on rhetoric. I also loved what you guys said about the poems that are the foundation of class. I'll talk about those probably a little more later as we get further into the class, how they relate directly to class. And the third thing is, I know there is an essay that was due. I'm aiming to have most of them graded by Sunday, but we ran into some drama in week 1. My son's daycare closed, which made it a little bit harder to stay focused on the first week of class, but I'm going to do everything I can, hopefully, to get your essays done graded by Sunday. So what I want to do now is I want to talk about the next aspect of rhetoric and argument. And it was great reading everyone's discussion about rhetoric. Some students seem to agree with me that with my definition of rhetoric, which is words that are used to manipulate, deceive, and con people. But it's always interesting that some students like to use the word persuasion. And so I am just sort of raising the question, is there a difference between the term persuade and the term mislead? So what we're going to do now is I'm going to add to the next level of our understanding of rhetoric and argument. And I'm going to talk about the 3 things that rhetoric and argument both use. And the 3 things that rhetoric and argument both use are logos, pathos, and ethos. And some of you may be familiar with these terms. Some of you may have never heard these terms before. So I'm going to kind of walk you through them and talk about these 3 terms. So the first one is logos. And logos is basically logic. And most students can kind of guess that. If you look at the word logos, it sounds like logic. It looks like logic. And so logos is the ability to use logic. And that makes sense if we want to accept some students' definition of rhetoric as the ability to persuade. Because if I'm going to persuade someone, I'm going to want to use logic. So logos is logic. Pathos is an appeal to emotion. And I tried to think of how do I create a mnemonic to remember that the P stands for emotion. So I always think of P as passionate, right? Someone who's very passionate might be catering to our emotions. Pathos stands for emotion. And if you think about my definition of rhetoric, which is words that are used to mislead, deceive, and con people, it would make sense then that you would use pathos, because we are all emotional beings, right? So that we might want to use emotion as a way to use rhetoric. And the final thing that rhetoric and argument uses, ethos. Ethos is an appeal to ethics. It can be an appeal to ethics and morals, but I will define ethos as character and authority. And so sometimes it's defined as ethics, but I will define it as character and authority, right? And so if you think about this, depending on the person's character, how likely are you to trust them, right? Because if you go and buy a car from a used car salesman, right, his character might be a little bit questionable. You'd want to critically think before buying a car from a used car salesman. As we progress, I'll kind of talk about these terms, but you're going to have a discussion board question that basically asks you to think about logos, pathos, ethos, and which one do you think is the most important when you would use rhetoric. And I'll look forward to seeing what you have to say, and look forward to posting another video for week 3.